Hello, this is Jake with Bill, and in this video, I'll be going over how you can configure your NetSuite integration and how this is going to be syncing over. Once your bill spend expense account is connected to NetSuite, we'll be able to get this configured. Please note that the integration is only going to support a one-to-one relationship between the bill spend expense account with the NetSuite subsidiary. So if you have multiple subsidiaries you need to sync to, this will require multiple bill spend expense accounts. Well, once you have that connected, you can navigate to your integrations. You'll open up NetSuite and just hit configure right there. And this is where we'll be able to configure the different options for how this is syncing. So just starting from the top, the sync from credit card accounts, you will want to create a bill spend expense credit card type account over in NetSuite with that subsidiary assigned to it. Any transaction we're syncing over will be crediting that account. The receipt sync is optional, but if you'd like, we can push the receipts over to NetSuite. They will live with the credit card transaction, and those are going to be the actual receipt images. The auto sync, if you enable this, this will sync over all transactions that are fully completed and approved every 24 hours. It's going to look back 7 days for transactions that have never been synced. However, you can manually sync transactions as well. I will show you how to do that later on. We do sync these credit card transactions over to NetSuite as credit card type objects. If you prefer, you can sync this over as journal entries. It is a different format, but you can change that if you'd like to. For the transaction posting dates, you have options in terms of the date that's being posted, whether you're using the cleared date when the transaction settled, or you can use the transaction date when that card was swiped. You can enable the billable field, so if a project and job is selected for a transaction, this will allow users to indicate if that is a billable expense or not. For sync split transaction as one transaction, you have the ability to split transactions in bill spend expense, code those splits to different GL accounts, classes, departments, whatever it may be. So if you have this enabled, when a split transaction syncs over to NetSuite, it would be one card transaction with multiple line items. If you don't have that enabled, the splits would each sync as their own credit card transaction. For the vendor sync, when we sync this over, we will push our vendors to NetSuite with the credit card transaction. It will try to find a vendor that's matching in NetSuite. If the matching vendor is found, it will sync to that vendor. If there's no match, it will create a new vendor. If you don't want this to be creating new vendors, you can set this to default to sync to only one vendor. So it doesn't have to be creating extra vendors. You can have that sync over and just default to one specific vendor. We do have a reimbursement sync, so if you're processing reimbursements, you can process that within our system. With this, we would sync these over as bills, and we're going to be reflecting that as a bill and the payments as well. So this is how you can enable those settings for the AP accounts that's reflecting in and the bank accounts that's being paid out from. Similar to this, we would sync over the employees as the vendors on the bill, but you can choose if you want just to default that to one specific vendor or employee within the system. Further down below, this is where you can set up our mapping and the different classifications that you'll be using within spend expense. So right here, you can see, we'll take a look at my chart of accounts. You're able to limit what you are pulling over. So the left-hand side is our full chart of accounts from NetSuite, but the right-hand side is how they're going to appear in bill spend expense. So if you prefer, you can pick and choose what's going to be available within the system. You don't have to bring everything over. You can even change the naming conventions if you'd like to. You can update this and make it more friendly for the end users. This mapping process will look very similar for all the different dimensions that you're using. So just to take a look at classes, for example, we can create that class. I'll call this NetSuite class. You can create this. And then when you first create this, you'll be prompted to automap those accounts. So if you automap, it's just going to pull over that full list. But from this point, you can click and choose what you're going to include or what you're going to exclude. So let's say I didn't want to include those two classes. I can unmap those accounts, hit save, and those won't be included within our list. If you are utilizing any custom segments within NetSuite, we can support up to 6 of those. Please note that they do need to be line item level custom segments that are list dropdowns. With all this information we're seeing here, nothing is permanent, so if you need to, you can come back and adjust it, add any accounts you'd like to later on, or just change this. But once everything's set up and you're ready to go, you can start syncing that over. So I mentioned transactions will auto sync if you have that enabled. but if you prefer, you can manually sync transactions to NetSuite. To do that, you'll come over to the transactions page. Let me just double check and make sure that this transaction is coded first. So once that's ready to go, you want to force that to sync over. You can either just select multiple transactions, that bulk action button will light up, and then you can hit sync to NetSuite. So now that sync is going to be processing. In just a moment, we'll see that sync status update. So now the sync status is updated. If you hover over it, it'll say synced. So we can go take a look at this in NetSuite. Coming over to NetSuite, when we're syncing as credit card transactions, you'll find this just within your card transactions. So you can come to your transactions, use credit card list, and then we'll go ahead and find that transaction. So this transaction came over. How this is syncing into it in the system, we'll be syncing that bill, spend, expense, credit card accounts. Like I mentioned, that's going to be on the credit side of things. And then we'll include anything that was classified on the transaction over in spend and expense. So I just had my GL account and my class mapped. But of course, if you have your departments, locations, customers, or any of those custom segments, those would be tagged on the transaction. The memo field, this will include information like the merchant's name, the card holder name, the budget name, and if they did leave any notes on that memo, it will be appended to it in that header memo or the line item memo. And as for the receipts that will show up, typically this would be in communication, just under files. And like I mentioned before, this will be the actual image of that receipt that is syncing over.